All right, welcome everyone to Control+M Presents, our bi-weekly session where we share a little bit of our Plex knowledge with you. It's our goal here at Control+M to be an education-focused partner, and we feel that the more you know, the better off the whole community will be, and that's a benefit for everyone. So, as a reminder, everyone's on mute as of right now. We are recording this session, and it will be posted to our YouTube channel with all our other sessions. If you haven't checked that out, please feel free to do so. Lots of content out there that you can like and subscribe. No obligation, a bunch of content in UX and Classic as well, also English and Spanish. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started with today's session. A while back, Shannon Hadley did do a basic SQL session that we had a lot of positive feedback on. And the follow-up was a request for VisionPlex. So today Shannon's going to cover that for us. Shannon's been working with Plex for about 4 years and is really strong in the report writing area and does a great job of explaining things in a very simple way. So with that being said, Shannon, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you and we can start our session for today.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking your time to join us for the Control+M Present session. Some of you might already be familiar with VisionPlex Screens. Some of you might not. So today we're going to be starting at the very beginning for those of you who might not be familiar. So we're going to talk about what they are. We're going to talk about locating existing VisionPlex screens in our own PCNs. We're going to make them visible if they're not already. And we're going to talk through how to make some basic changes to what's being displayed in an existing screen. And we're going to take a tour of the designer. For example, maybe making columns or filters visible or hide them. We'll also talk about different ways of checking them out and publishing them. And then towards the end of the session, we're going to take an existing query and we're going to make our very own VisionPlex screen. So we'll not be covering anything complex today. We'll keep it basic and we'll try not to get too advanced. And maybe we could save that for another Control+M Present session. I will try to cover both UX and Classic, but the focus will be around the UX VisionPlex screens. And I will try to point out differences as we go. So now that we've got what we're going to do and what we're not going to do out of the way, let's just jump right in. VisionPlex screens allow us to control what is visible to the end user on the front end. We can control column visibility, download, export options, and what filters are available for use. We can even format the data to return it a specific way for the user. Unlike standard reports, we can also target the changes we make to a specific user, to a PCN, or to an entire group of PCNs at an enterprise level. The best part about VisionPlex screens is that they're set up in such a way that you don't need to be a programmer to edit one, or even create your own, unless, of course, you're writing your own query to start. UX has a wonderful tool that we'll talk about a little bit later called the VisionPlex Screen Wizard. And it's a step-by-step guide walking you through everything to help you get set up with your own custom screen. Now, this wizard is available only in UX. The edit screen that we'll focus on is called the designer, which is the editing mode of a VisionPlex screen. Unlike SQL queries ran direct in the SQL environment, VisionPlex screens do have some limitations. Displayed screen results will be limited to about 1,000 lines. VisionPlex screens get their data from SQL queries or data sources. And VisionPlex screens that use data sources from the SQL development environment, it's not live data. It's near real-time reporting, which is every 4 hours. It's always easier to edit an existing VisionPlex screen wherever possible versus creating one from scratch. All VisionPlex screens have actions, elements, panels, and a data source. Actions are like what you see throughout the Plex environment in the blue action bar, and you can add these actions in or remove them. And elements are individual sections of a VisionPlex screen, and they can have elements inside them such as grids or columns. And a data source is a connection to a database in Plex. And the data in here is what would feed your VisionPlex screen or report, such as the parts database. So how do you know what screens are available to you? You can navigate to the screen list by using the go-to menu search options in UX and typing in VisionPlex Screens, or you could use the Control+M pop-up search in Classic and search for VisionPlex Screen List Customer. Once in there, you can do an open search, and you'll be provided with a complete list of all VisionPlex screens available to you. Like other search options, you can narrow down your search results by module and return a smaller set of screens more focused on what you're looking for. If you're looking, for example, a BOM component report, VisionPlex screen, you can do a module search by bill of materials. And you can click on the link directly from the VisionPlex screen list. And you'll be brought directly to the editing of the screen with a designer. In Classic, clicking the report link in this screen will open the report itself to run. And from there to edit, you just have to open up the design screen, which I'm going to show you. The VisionPlex screen you want might not be available through the menu search options. In this case, for UX, you would have to navigate to the Reports module and into the setup to flag the screen as visible and click Apply. Once the setup is done and the screen is flagged, it will be available through the regular search options in the Report section. Depending on your security access, you may have to contact your administrator to turn on the required screen for you. In Classic, you can also turn on screens. Once it's available, you can navigate to the section where you'd like the report to be located and click on Add Node at the top of your screen. In the menu node setup, you would select the option of VisionPlex screen, and in the Actions section, you can select the VisionPlex screen you'd like the node to display. And from there, you could maybe add in additional security at a node level for everybody. So are you able to edit existing VisionPlex screens? Well, with the right permissions, you most certainly can. And if you do not have access, again, you'll have to speak to your system administrator. For anyone who is a Plex admin or a champion on the call, I'd make sure that these permissions are restricted to specific groups of people in your organization. Changes that are made to these screens at a PCN or enterprise level are changes made for every user at that level. So you really need to be careful granting access to your users. And if you do have access, you can find out if the screen you're looking at is a VisionPlex screen or not by clicking your mouse on the gears icon in UX, and you'll see an option for VisionPlex Designer. Clicking on that will bring you direct into the designer mode of that screen. In Classic, you can hover your mouse in the top right of your screen, and you'll see a link for VisionPlex Tools. Clicking that link will bring you to the design screen. If you're trying to edit a VisionPlex screen and you're not sure, it's sometimes helpful to find an existing VisionPlex screen that operates in a similar way as what you want. And you can use it as a guide to help configure the one you're trying to make changes to. So Designer is the visual editor within Plex that you use to edit or build VisionPlex screens. So let's take a quick tour and go through some of the items on the screen. When you first open the Designer, you're going to see the information bar at the top, the screen message, and it's notifying you what mode you're currently in. In the case of first navigating into the Designer, it would say you are currently in read-only mode. Any changes made to this screen will not persist. If I select out checkout mode of personal, it would display you're currently in a personal checkout. The personal checkout will affect Shannon Hadley. Filter panels hold elements that you can add to the screen to control the search criteria or the filters. The application action bar displays buttons in the VisionPlex application that executes actions such as printing or exporting the records. The action bar lists your screen actions that you can perform, and these actions change once the screen is checked out. Your properties panel on the far right, it's the properties of the selected objects in the designer. In this case, I have part numbers column selected, and in the properties panel, it's displaying my options for the part column. And elements are the components that make up VisionPlex screens, such as a grid that contains other elements such as columns. Once you select your checkout level, you can start making changes in the designer. Until a checkout mode is selected, no changes can be made or saved to the screen. Checkout levels determine which users can see what changes are being made to a VisionPlex screen. Now, what you select here has potential big impact in the PCN. Your checkout options are Enterprise, which are level changes visible to all users of PCNs in a multiple PCN environment. Company level changes are visible to users of the same PCN. Personal level changes are visible to the current logged in user. On behalf level changes are made by a champion on behalf of another user who is not a VisionPlex designer, and those changes are visible only to that user. Generally, it's not a great idea to make changes at a personal level. Your instance of the report might not match someone else's version of the report. And if you happen to be in a meeting together, it might cause some confusion of what's what. Once you select an element, it's going to highlight with a red dotted line to identify it. In the Properties panel, you can make changes to that specific element. The Property panel changes depending on what you've selected. In this case, I highlighted the operation number. And in the Properties panel, it displays the available options I have for that column. I can choose to hide or show the column. Elements that are not currently visible will be grayed out. So selecting that element and then checking the visible flag will allow it to become visible at that checkout level and will no longer be grayed out. In Classic, double-clicking the field will open a panel to edit that element. You can customize the application action bar by adding or removing actions. And clicking the Add will display options such as the Export menu. And once that's selected, it'll now appear as an action in the action bar for the user. Once a checkout level is selected, the options in your blue action bar change. Now, previewing a screen enables you to test the screen's functionality before saving. And you can use the preview mode that best fits the purpose of your screen. You have a normal and an update. Now, normal previews a VisionPlex screen grid in the run mode, and an update previews the VisionPlex form in an edit or update mode. Saving a screen is not publishing your changes. Now, you may want to save your screen if you need to log out of Plex before you've finished your designs. It enables you to return to your changes without publishing it to the PCN before your changes are complete. And then there's always the fail-safe of undo checkout. Now, this will undo any changes you made in the designer, and it'll reset the screen back to the way it was. Once you have all your changes done, the preview looks good, you saved your changes, you can now check it back in. And then you can publish it at the level you selected on the checkout. Now, there's several questions you'll need to ask yourself before deciding to create your own VisionPlex screen from scratch, starting with a query. Maybe you have a user who wants to run a report regularly, and it's becoming time-consuming to ask the SQL report writer to run it all the time for them. And this would be a worthwhile for creating a screen for the user to run when they need to. Or maybe it's a brand new report that will be used by various members of a department. and only you can decide if it's worthwhile creating a screen for a new or existing query. So let's talk SQL queries and creating a VisionPlex screen from an existing one. So for this example, I'm going to use a small query that was written for the other Control+M present session on SQL. And I would like my VisionPlex screen to have a date filter on a part created date. So step one for a SQL query to be available as a VisionPlex screen, we need to flag it as such in the properties to allow it to be a usable data source. And I know I want my report to be filterable by a date range. So I'm going to add a parameter to my query to be able to tell it which columns I want to filter by. So step two would be to add the filter parameter in the properties tab. In the same place, we flag it as the VisionPlex data source. Step three, we have to put in our query itself what the parameters mean. And what I mean by this is, what are we considering the start date to be? In this case, we're looking at the column of created date. Now, for a lot of you, this might seem like a lot, but every time you add a date filter, it's the same code. And you can copy and paste from another report and simply replace the column of where the data is pulling from. The code in the parameter in the properties section also never changes, unless, of course, you want to put specific data in there. Otherwise, it's also just a copy and paste. Now, I know we're going through all these steps to create a VisionPlex screen that we created in another session, or that you may have created for another user. In this case, you'll already be familiar with basic SQL and can simply add these two code pieces to your existing queries. But if we were to create a VisionPlex screen from an existing Plex data source, these pieces of code will already be there. And I'm going to show you that in a little bit when we do the demo. Another helpful hint is Googling SQL parameters is also a good resource when you're looking for something. Once we have our SQL query available for VisionPlex, we can now navigate to the VisionPlex wizard. And just a quick side note again, the VisionPlex wizard is available in UX only. Creating the VisionPlex screens in Classic involve a few more steps, and you'll have to navigate to the Query Writer menu and the Query Writer data sources, and you can create a VisionPlex screen from there. Navigate to the VisionPlex wizard through the main menu, platform reporting and analytics, and VisionPlex, or by using just the go-to search menu and type it in. The first part it's going to ask you is what type of VisionPlex you're wanting to create. You have the options of grid, form, or chart. So the standard report for what we're looking for is just going to be a grid. So there's 4 steps that are part of the wizard where it's going to ask you to choose options along the way at each of these 4 steps. And you have the option of selecting your SQL query by the type of query writer stored procedure, and then search or type the name of your existing query. You could also use a data source that's already been created by Plex for use in various modules. And we're going to take a look at that during our demo and see the available data sources that are there for you. It's also going to show you your available columns and filters, or the parameters that we added to the query. So clicking next would prompt you to select totals in your screen. Now, this is great if you were totaling sales orders or pricing. In this case, we're just going to leave them as counts for record counts. It'll prompt you for actions you want available, such as printing or export. And the final step is to give it a name and select under which module you want it to be stored. And at the end of step 4, we click Finish. And it's going to prompt us to either launch or edit our screen. And if we just said launch, it would just bring us right to our newly created VisionPlex screen. So at this point, we would just need to go back and do a few more steps. We would publish it and make it visible to a user. What I'm going to show you all of this, it might seem simple to some or complicated to others. So we're going to hop over into test now, and we're going to do all of these things together so you can see how simple it really is. So let's start off with, let's say we have a user that's looking for a report for BOM components. And we can look and see what VisionPlex or reports are already available for that user. If I use the go-to search and I typed in BOM, it's going to display at the bottom of my screen the reports section available. So down at the report search results, we can see there's two available reports. There's the cost model BOM and a container trace pipe BOM. And it doesn't seem like that's what the user was asking for. So we could go to the VisionPlex screen list that we saw in the presentation. And go right to the VisionPlex screens. Oh boy. And we can look for, you can do a wide open search. We can do it by module, or we can do it by the report itself. So I'm just going to type in a keyword here, and I'm just going to look for BOM. And it's going to pull up all of the available BOM reports under the different modules. So let's say I have what they were asking for based on their email or their requirements. It said BOM component availability. Well, that looks like it would be what they were looking for. But we know the report or this VisionPlex screen doesn't appear when we do the search. So we're going to have to make this as a visible report. And we would do that by navigating to the report section and turning it on. I already know what my report is called that I'm going to look at. So I can go right into the setup and into the available reports. And we're going to look for the BOM component availability report. So we can see that there's no flag on the report, which means that it's not an active report. To turn it on, we can simply click on the report and click apply. So now when we do a search for a BOM report, it's actually going to be visible for users in their PCN. To run the report, we would simply click on it. And we can see all of the available work centers and all of the available columns in the report. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go into the designer. We're just going to make a few surface changes. I'm going to click the gears icon and I'm going to go into the VisionPlex designer. So like we saw in the presentation, you'll see the screen message at the top that you're currently in read-only mode. So we know right off the bat, we're going to have to do a checkout of the screen before we can make changes. So we're going to check it out at a company level. So now it's telling us what checkout level we're in. We could do a few things here. Let's say the user did not want to have to search by work center. They're only interested in availability of the BOM components at the part number level. When we click on the element here, again, you'll see the red dotted line, and on the far right, the properties panel populated with the information for that field. And we have options here to make it visible or not visible. And we're going to go ahead and turn that off. And we're going to click Save. You see how the box went grayed out? That means it's not visible to a user. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for a column. When I click the column, the red dotted line appears and the filter panel gets populated. So we can go ahead and turn that off as well. I'm going to save my changes. So we're just going to do a quick little check here, and I'm going to open up the report in another screen again. So you see, I made the save changes, but it hasn't actually updated the screen yet. So when we go back in here and we're finished with the changes that we want, we can do a check-in. And we're going to check it back in. And for those of you familiar with like the DS environment, where you can check out documents, make changes, and check them back in, it's almost like the same process. So now we've also got a second message up here. Okay, so we got pending changes. So if we click on the pending changes that we made, blue action bar changes. So now we can publish those changes. So if we go back to our report and we refresh this page, you can, you can see that we've now lost the Work Center code because we've disabled it, and we've also lost the column. So now every user who accesses the report through the go-to search, it's going to appear the same way for everybody. So let's hop over into Classic, and we're just going to do a quick little tour of the same thing. So if we hop over into Classic here, and we do a search for, oh my goodness. If we're going to look for a BOM component availability report, let's do that again. So we get some information about BOMs, but we don't actually have any of the BOM component reports showing. So we'll navigate to the All Reports section. And we can look by report type. And we're going to look at all of the available VisionPlex reports. So here, if we look, we have an actual BOM component availability report that is now, it is visible already with the same filters. But since we did a Control+M search and it didn't come up, we can make it available for users. And we can do that through the adding of a node. So let's say I go to the main menu and I want to add the node into the Office menu, into say the purchasing menu. Click up at the far left up here, and we're going to go add node. So our action, instead of being menu, we're going to link it to a VisionPlex screen. And down here, we can say which VisionPlex screen we want. So if we partially type in and hit the list, we're going to get all of the available VisionPlex screens that we could link there. And we're going to put it as the BOM component availability. And I'm going to copy this, and I'm just going to give it the name of the box at the top and simply say add. So now we have a node that links directly to our VisionPlex screen. If I did a search now for the BOM report, I'm going to see the BOM component availability VisionPlex screen available under the purchasing menu. If I wanted to make some changes to this screen, I would hover over the logo and I would go into the VisionPlex tools into the design mode. So it looks a little bit different than what UX does. It doesn't have the same look and feel. But again, we have to, we're going to open up the assistant. But we do have the checkout levels of enterprise, company, and personal. Now, I'm not going to go through and make all of the changes in here, but you would do the same process we did. We're going to do a company level checkout, and we're going to turn on or off the columns by using double clicking the field. So I'm going to hop back over into Classic, or to, excuse me, into UX. And remember when I said that it was easier sometimes to create a VisionPlex screen from an existing data source instead of one from scratch? And I'm going to show you why. And there's many existing data sources that you can choose from with filters, parameters already built in. And we just need to find one that would suit your needs. So let's do another VisionPlex screen, but let's create one with the existing Plex data source. And we're going to look for one for customer parts. But first, we're going to navigate into the actual VisionPlex wizard. So again, the very first question it's going to ask you is if you want to do a grid, a form, or a chart. In this case, we're just going to make a standard report, and we're going to select grid and click OK. The first question here is the type. If we were going to pull the report from our own query, we would click this one. If we're going to pull it from an existing data source, we would select the stored procedure. If I click on the data source of what we're looking for, you're going to see hundreds or if not thousands of standard data sources that are already in here created by Plex. We can narrow it down by looking for, say, just parts. I want to look for customer parts example. So if I scroll down and I can see, oops. You see about 14 or 15 individual data sources for customer parts. Now, this screen is not very detailed on what you can and can't see, what's available on the report, but all you have to do is click on it, and the screen will populate and let you know what filters and columns are available. Now, this one looks like a little bit overkill for what the user is looking for, is just a list of parts. So we can just go back in, click on parts, and try to find one that would work. So I'm going to go with the parts picker part. And this one was a little more simple than what we're looking for. It has 3 filters at the top and a few columns. Now I can just simply select all of them and not be choosy about my columns. But looking at this really quickly, I know the user is not going to be interested in a part key or a customer part key or a part key. They're never going to need that information. That would be our joins for our SQL tables. So I'm on the first step here. So now that I've selected my columns and filters, I can click next, and it's going to ask how I want to summarize it. Now I can include a record count based on, say, the part number itself. I'm not going to do any subtotals and totaling since it's not a dollar, and I don't really need a grand total. But you can play with the different checkboxes or flags available to you on your VisionPlex screen, and they can be changed as well. So now I'm going to click next, and now this is for step number 3 for our actions, for giving the user the print option or the export option. So I'm going to go ahead and click export. So the final step is finalize, and we're going to give this report a name, and we're going to call this, call it Control+M Presents. In the module, in the live environment, you would be able to select the module you'd like it linking to. In this case, in the test environment, I'm going to put it through the testing module. So now that I've done all 4 steps, my only option is to either go back or click finish. So now it's saying, do you want to create another one? Do you want to launch it? Or would you like to edit it? In this case, we're just going to go ahead and just click launch. So now we have what we saw in the wizard of the 3 filters and all of the columns. So but there's a few steps that we still have to do. If I tried to look for this report, again, it's not going to be visible for the users. So I'm going to have to go into the report section. And we're going to go into the setup, the available reports. And we're just going to look for our report. So you can see that it's not flagged as visible. So all we have to do is flag it and click apply. So now if we did an actual search for a screen, it would actually be available in the reports section. So now that we've got the first one done and the second one done, we're going to go and we're just going to step it up a little bit, and we're going to make some changes to an existing SQL query that we have already made that we saw in the presentation. So I'm going to navigate over into my SQL environment. And I'm going to open up my report. So this is a very simple SQL query with the part number, name, and the part source. Now, like we saw in the presentation, we have a few steps that we need to do. So in order for a SQL query to be available as a data source, we need to flag it as such for the VisionPlex. And we do that through the Properties tab. And we can flag it as a VisionPlex data source. And we're going to click Save. Now, remember when I said that we needed to add in little pieces of code for the SQL query, and I can just copy and paste that from, sorry guys, from another report. It never changes. We can leave that standard there. So that's just saying this is how we're going to do the filter of the VisionPlex screen. I'm going to click Save, and we can go back to our query. Now that we've told it that it's a VisionPlex data source, we've set the parameters of what we're going to have as a filter, we're going to have to tell it what we're going to filter it on. So again, I'm going to copy the code from, say, another report, and I'm going to do it in a where clause at the bottom. So because this one was copied from another one where I was filtering on a ship date, I can simply replace the code with the column that I actually want to have the date filter on. And I could do that. I replace it in the 3. And we can click Save. Oops, did I miss one? Oh. Okay. And that's all we have to do to say an existing SQL query in order to have a simple date filter on there. So now that I have my query, I'm going to navigate back into the VisionPlex wizard, and we're going to create our own screen from our own query instead of one of the existing data sources. And we're going to make it still a standard report. So instead of selecting first one, the second one that we did, which was the stored procedures, we're going to take it from the query writer stored procedure, and we're going to look for our data source. And because it was the only one that started with an SH, it's just pre-populating with all the information. So now we can see the 2 filters that we've added, as well as the 4 columns that are on our report. And we can just simply flag them all and click Next. I'm going to just put a record count based off of the part number and click Next. And again, our action bar for our users, we're going to allow them to export the data that's there. And the final one is we're going to call it just simple Shannon VisionPlex screen. And click Finished. Again, our 3 options. So we're going to go ahead and launch it. So it looks like we've got everything that we need here. There's a few things I can see that I don't like. I've got the starting with an end date picker and ending with the start date picker. So it's not very intuitive. So I'm going to go into the designer, and I'm going to go to the VisionPlex designer at the bottom. I'm in a read-only mode. I'm going to do a checkout at a company level. And to reverse the 2, to replace them, I guess, would be I could simply click and drag and have it start with the start date and end with the end date. I'm also going to maybe change the name, and I'm going to call it Created Start Date. And we're going to call it Created End Date. So I'm going to save my changes. And we're going to check it back in. And we're going to publish it. So once again, just because I've made the VisionPlex screen does not make it visible for the end user. We need to go back into the reports and do the same thing, make it visible. Once I click apply, and now I can do a search, and there is my VisionPlex screen with the changes that we made. Okay, so now that we've covered finding existing VisionPlex screens in your PCN and emailing them, or sorry, enabling them, checkouts, check-ins, editing existing ones, creating one from an existing data source, and even creating one from your own query. That is my presentation for today. So we're going to go back to the presentation and see if anybody has any questions. Does anybody have any questions?
Excellent content today, Shannon. I'm sure everybody has a little more confidence now in developing their own reports.
I hope so. That was the goal. Does anybody have any questions for me that we could maybe cover a little bit?
One question I have is when you do on behalf of, can you do multiple names in that, or can it only be a singular person in that?
I believe you'd have to do it each checkout on behalf of one at a time, but Kevin, maybe you could confirm that.
Yeah, I believe that's accurate. It is one at a time.
Anybody else?
I have one question. Is it possible to create a VP screen from an existing data source in Classic, or is that functionality just a UX?
And I think it's been a while. I haven't done anything in Classic. I'd have to try that one. Is there any way I can take a look at that and maybe get back to you and see if we could maybe throw some screenshots on how to do that if it's possible?
Sure, because I was looking at the data sources and I'm only seeing the ones I created in the list for the query writer data sources, or maybe I'm missing a menu note or something in Classic.
Okay. Can you send me an email on that and let me just take a peek at it, and I'll see if I can send you some screenshots if it's possible. Okay. We'll take that
Sure,
one-on-one. Okay.
Me too. I have a question.
Go ahead.
So we have a store procedure which we change it. So there we add a new field. So in the report we should have a new column. But when I go into the VisionPlex, I cannot see a variable this new field to add like a new column. How this can be done?
So you've made the change in your SQL query and you had an existing VisionPlex screen.
Yes.
But the new column is not showing there?
Exactly. But this is in Classic.
Oh, in Classic also. So yeah, that one's a little more complicated. You have to do there's a few steps that have to be done. You have to do a refresh of the query into the VisionPlex screen also. That'll refresh. It's in the, let's see if I can remember where that is. Can you guys still see my screen for the Classic? Okay. Let's see if I can see where that is. So in this screen here, you would find your you would find your report. Let me go here. And you could do, once you had a VisionPlex screen, you could refresh the data on it here.
Okay.
Then that would make it visible inside there. You would go, you know how you added your columns the first time when you created the VisionPlex screen? Once you refresh your data source, that column should now be visible in that list to do a checkbox and flag it on.
Okay.
Try that.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question I still have, it's about the notification through the email. Is possible to be done. So let's say a report to be sent automatically specific time directly from IntelliPlex.
From IntelliPlex?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can set up a SQL report that you've created, and it would link into the IntelliPlex, and from there you could create a schedule for delivery, but you'd have to do some configuration of your SQL report inside of the IntelliPlex environment and set that schedule up to be emailed, daily, weekly, monthly, however you wanted. I think we have a session out there on IntelliPlex to help you with that. If you look at the Control+M present sessions, I think Veronica did a really good one on that too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Any further questions as we kind of wrap up this session? Just a heads up for everyone, the content in 2 weeks will be quality focused. So Kim Keller is going to be with us, and we're going to go through what Plex refers to as custom check sheet data collection. There's a special feature within quality that when we want to validate certain things are provided. So things like text, part numbers, Julian dates, elapsed time. Ken has some really neat applications for validating that certain features or values are present using the XBC module to allow for that those features to be validated against. So feel free to let your quality department know about this one, and stay tuned for that session. Okay. We do want to thank everyone for joining us. I understand that everyone's time is valuable, so please check out our YouTube channel and feel free to reach out with any recommendation for future content. We're certainly glad to entertain requests, and we will go ahead and close the session for today. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.